Chapter 38. Kitty Galore promised to leave the kitchen door unlocked for me the next night. When she'd distracted the guards with some harmless flirtations, I hauled my ass over the wall in the pre-dawn dimness. I spied a guard at the front door, but he didn't notice when I dropped to the ground, then crept around back to the kitchen entrance Kitty'd indicated. When I heard the tumbler thrown, I counted off 60 seconds like she'd asked, then slipped inside. If I'd had lock-picking skills, I would have saved her the risk, but such was life as a fucking nobody. After easing open the door, I hunched low in the faint light of a tiny crystal over a marble sink. Wasn't Bowminster fancy, painting the bowl and faucet in its minimal glow? With polished marble and brushed metals that gleamed in its scant aura, the kitchen would have been right at home in the real world. Somehow, I hadn't expected it. Even more of a surprise was the goblin who slipped in while I lurked in the shadows beside the counter closest to the entry. But there he fucking was, reaching for an empty glass from a row positioned neatly on a towel where they'd been left to dry. He flicked the tap to fill it with water. Own Butler Goblin. Level 5. Although I had every intention of letting him go, then slipping up the hallway toward the stairs Kitty indicated on a map she'd drawn then sent to my interface, the unlucky bastard turned his head my way at the wrong time. I wasn't about to wait in the shadows to find out if he saw me. That would give him time to raise the alarm. Bummer. He dropped the glass when I charged, shattering it in the marble sink. If not for the situation and my pumping adrenals, I might have winced at the sudden outburst of sound, worried that a nosy guard might hear it and appear in the doorway. But what was done was done. Cussing under my breath, I barreled in. When I kicked the goblin's feet out from under him, he grasped the edge of the countertop, but I slashed his throat with the trusty knife I'd been sporting since taking out the talons. Blood splashed all over the slate floor, spraying an arc across the white cabinets, but not a peep uttered from his gray-green mouth. He collapsed on the floor, clamping both hands over the gaping wound. Rivers of red flowed between and around his tiny fingers. I left him where he fell. You attacked the butler. Critical hit. Congratulations. You have slain a butler. You have gained 157 XP. Snarky AI. I paused to listen for any heavy footfalls resulting from the shattered glass and short struggle, but none came. Nothing but the muffled quiet of a house at rest. I found the servant's stairs right where Kitty had indicated, but hesitated with my hand on the banister when the doorknob 5 feet from me squeaked, then clicked. Had to be the guard I'd seen at the front when I went over the wall. I slipped behind the door, hoping he wouldn't make it swing wide enough to bump me and alert him of my presence. The guard wasn't any butler. He was an orc, and the goons at the bar with whom I'd made the deal to spare Tansy's family protection schemes didn't want a high body count. They'd hire these orcs, but not if I made too much trouble. Killing their boss would be enough of an issue. Galore had waffled about a maid, a cook, a butler, and whatever, flipping her hand dismissively. In the moment I straightened to press my back against the wall as the door swung toward me, it pissed me off. I never would have undertaken an op in the real world with so little information. Intel was key. But Bowminster's high walls left little room for me to recon the place, and Kitty had been my best source. When the door stopped inches from my face, I held my breath. The orc stepped forward and I had to suppress a gasp. He stood 7 feet tall, if an inch, not the kind of opponent I wanted anything to do with. But I slipped my blade free, then clutched it in case I needed to act. But he shrugged, turned in the direction that kept me out of his sightline as I was concealed behind the door, then pulled it closed as he stepped outside again. Releasing the breath I didn't know I'd been holding, I crept to the staircase, then eased the toes of one foot onto the first step to test for squeaky wood. As I ascended, I stuck to the outer edges of the treads where they were more likely to be stable and quiet. The balcony where I'd seen Bowminster was on the 3rd floor, so I ignored the first landing. At the top of the next flight, I peeked into the hallway. Several nightlights glowed in bottles along the way, providing just enough illumination for an orc standing with a book propped open in both hands to read by. That was unexpected. Not the guard, which Galore had warned me about, but that he'd be reading. He was turned partially away from me, focused on the pages of his book, sweeping his finger along the lines he read. Slinking as low as I could manage, I crept like I might set off a motion detector. System messages dismissed so I could concentrate. I covered the last 2 yards between us at a crawl while holding my breath. But the orc threw down his book at the last second and snatched my lapels in both fists. Acting on instinct, I thrust my forearms up between his, then flung them outward to strike his wrists at the base of the thumbs, breaking his grip just long enough to gain an advantage. Shit! The heavy footfalls and the orc's grunts equaled too much noise. I bumped into a side table, rocking the big ceramic vase atop it. He parted his big, ugly lips as if to call out, so I grabbed the teetering trinket between my knife fist and free hand, then smashed it against his face. Noise be damned. Time to clean house. You're fucking up everything, I hissed as he staggered blindly toward me, shouting the alarm. I shoved him back against the wall and stabbed the point of my knife into his throat. His blood sprayed all over my fresh clothes, which kind of pissed me off. Not that I'd expected to escape the mission unbloodied. His knees buckled as he gushed like a fountain, then slid down the wall to the floor with his hands patting uselessly at the hole in his neck. Oh well, at least I looked the part of a killer. My gaze couldn't help but flick to my XP bar ticking up in the corner of my field of vision. Critical hit. You have slain an orc guardsman. 215 XP. I dismissed the message bubble. Elation at the idea I'd killed one of the fearsome-looking brutes sent a nice surge of endorphins through my bloodstream and to my virtual brain. There was no way Bowminster hadn't heard that. I could only hope he cowered beneath the covers waiting for rescue. But when I paused at his door to let my ears soak in my surroundings, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I tucked away my bloody knife. Fingers crossed on one hand, I used the other to ease the door to the master bedroom open. It didn't creak, but the moment I peered around the doorframe, a light clicked on overhead. So much for stealth. Bowminster dropped down onto the end of the bed where Galore perched. Adorned in the same smoking jacket over striped pajamas, he sneered to reveal rows of crooked yellow teeth. Conclusion: cosmetic dentistry had not arrived in River City. Kitty'd slipped into a barely there red dress, and it looked more like something that belonged under a dress. She bent to fasten on a pair of strappy sandals, as if I hadn't just busted in. The second the goblin landed, Kitty slipped off the mattress. Bowminster scowled. You fucked me, you bitch! You sold me out! Sorry, Lyle. The humans have designs on your business, and I'm not about to cross those guys. But you'll cross me? She shrugged with obvious disinterest. What was done was done. You might have some muscle around the city, but the Antonellis? No thanks, Lyle. They butter my bread better. You ungrateful slut! His hands shot out to snatch her, but Kitty slid away and slinked toward me. I stepped out of the doorway so she could pass. She paused, tucking her purse under her arm to run her nails through her silky hair. You'll tell them I did good, yeah? When I answered, my gaze remained locked on the goblin. I'll tell them you were perfect. She swayed out the door, throwing her tail into it to emphasize her hips. I suspected it was a final message to the goblin she'd duped. Not that I was dropping my guard. I trusted her about as far as I could throw her in my halfling form. If I let her get behind me and her sentiments about the Antonellis turned out to be subterfuge, I'd end up with a blade in my back. So, I eyed the goblin as I slid toward the wall, while listening as the click-clack of her shoes faded down the main stairs. She seemed to be leaving, and I'd have to count on that for now. But would she alert the front door guard on her way by? Fuck, I hoped not. When I returned my focus to Bowminster, the goblin brandished a wand, or a small polished branch. I was betting on a wand. He swept it to one side, then purple energy filled the stem and engulfed his hand before creeping to the tip. Something about staring down a magical weapon for the first time made me flinch. I resumed notifications. Recalling how I'd inspected the wand I delivered to Pratcha the gnome's shop, I focused on the weapon, hoping to divine some quick info. But the energy surged bright, then Bowminster flicked it in my direction. I darted through the doorframe and into the hallway. The electrical buzz of energy sizzling on the other side of the wall behind me caused me to drop to one knee and cringe. Lyle Bowminster uses Wand of Paralysis. Miss! Shit! How fast would that motherfucker be ready to go again? Did it have to recharge, or could he just nail me the moment I showed myself? I hugged the wall, glimpsing around until I spied him scrambling toward the door with that wand in hand. After sliding the borrowed brass knuckles onto my left hand, I clenched my fist around the metal, rose, then edged back half a step. I wound my arm into position, ready to wallop. In an epically stupid move, he thrust the wand through the doorway. I grabbed the wooden stem without considering the wisdom of that move, then yanked hard. His grip proved stronger than I'd anticipated, but his reluctance to let go served me as I dragged him on slippered feet into the hall just far enough to deliver a fierce uppercut. You attack Lyle Bowminster. Lyle Bowminster, minus 17 HP. He staggered, teeth clacking, and his grip on the wand loosened. I snatched it away and but lost my grip, flinging it to the end of the corridor, where it bounced and spun on the floor. Well, good. Something went right. Or right-ish. At least he wasn't holding it. But no unsecured weapon was truly out of play. One of the goblin's hands shot to his jaw in a reflex, but the other raked thick, horny claws at my face. I wove backward but felt the sting of a glancing slash. Lyle Bowminster attacks. Minus 11 HP, I hissed between my front teeth. Blood ran down my cheek, more dripped from my temple into my eye. I swiped it away on my sleeve, stepping back to give myself space. Bastard. I spun as I dropped low, then extended one leg to let the force of my turn do the work. My foot struck his knee, but the door jamb saved him as he thumped into it, steadied himself, then backpedaled into the bedroom. Why confine himself? Unless he plans to leap from the balcony, he must have another weapon. Throwing caution to the wind, I shot into the room. To wait was to die. I found the fucker hunched over, drawing a huge sword from beneath the bed. He jerked it free from the decorative scabbard, then tossed the sheath aside. Bold of you to think you could beard the lion in his den, Lyle snarled, and his sour green face contorted into something monstrous. How did Galore cope with that on top of her? He freed one hand from the pommel to beckon with two fingers. Come get your reward, halfling. You fancy yourself a lion? I grasped my knife in one hand and the knuckles in the other. With such short-ranged melee weapons, I'd have to find my way inside the reach of that sword without getting hacked to death. I flipped the knife to a reversed grip and relaxed my knees as he sidestepped to the middle of the room. He grinned, revealing those yellow, jagged teeth. You want to jabber or you want to get on with this, motherfucker? I showed my own bring it gesture. He leapt at me without further comment, bringing the sword down in an efficient Eastern-style strike with designs on slicing my shoulder off my torso. I flung myself aside just enough to avoid the blade, the side of my hip braced against the base of an ornate dresser. Lyle Bowminster uses lunging strike. Miss. While he completed his follow-through, I lunged, sweeping my knife in a shallow arc aimed at his face. Whether by luck or skill, he recovered from his attack in time to parry my knife and send it flying from my grip. It shot through the room, then rattled onto the balcony via the open door. I grabbed his lapel and sleeve, twisted my hips, then planted my other knee into his midriff. As I let myself fall back, extended my leg, then he went up and over, flailing and losing the sword in a clatter as he slammed onto his back. It had worked in the ring, so why stop using it? You use Yoko Tomonage, Lyle Bowminster, minus 18 HP. By the time I rolled to my feet, Bowminster was scrambling on hands and knees toward the hallway. I lunged, but he shot up at the last second and scampered away. His sword lay on the floor between us. I grinned, snatching it up in my main hand before charging after the goblin bastard. But the moment I'd taken to shift my gaze to the sword proved all he needed to get his wits about him. Lyle stood at the far end of the hall, glowing wand in hand. His arm flicked, and he unleashed the energy as I burst into the corridor. With no other options, I allowed my body to collapse to the floor. Although I sensed the sizzling energy as the burst passed overhead, my evasion was pure luck. Inches from paralysis, inches from level 1. I charged, but Bowminster stood his ground, arms relaxed, wand dangling at his hip. 2 steps short of my target, a beefy hand reached in from the direction Galore had gone. The noise had alerted the giant at the front door downstairs. He lifted me by the back of the neck like my collar was puppy's scruff. I whipped my closest arm away to curl it across my body, then brought it back to deliver a hard elbow to the door guard's jaw. Something cracked. He released me, then reeled backward. I hooked my foot behind his knee to help him to the floor, but before he fell, I brought the sword around and slashed. The blade skated on the lower edge of his chest plate, skipped, then sliced across his abdomen. Bellows of pain rang in my ears. The orc's hands went to the gash, pressing down like he tried to keep his guts inside. My periphery caught the purple energy signature of the wand loading up for another blast to one side. I charged the goblin while yelling, "Stay down, orc! You're not on my list!" Although I lunged, the wand's purplish hue bloomed, then a finger of purple fire shot toward me. I twisted at the last moment, but my luck had run out. Lyle Bowminster casts Paralyze. Glancing contact. You are partially paralyzed. Effect duration, 15 seconds. No matter how I struggled to push myself up, my left arm wouldn't cooperate. Tingling sensations radiated from wrist to shoulder. The knuckles slipped from my slack hand to thump to the floor. The goblin stalked toward me, viciousness blazing in his beady eyes and wearing a nasty grin. "Time's up, noob!" I bore down on the hilt of the sword clutched in my functioning hand, watching the timer in the little bubble in my peripheral vision. Fuck! He was going to finish me before I could do anything about it. He kicked me in the jaw. I fell over backward, eyes welling up. My system announced the damage, but I swept it away with my mind. He stepped toward me, and I shook off the impact just in time to bend one knee, then send my heel into his shin just as he raised it from the floor. His slipper skidded backward as his legs swept out from under, and his eyes grew wide as he plummeted toward me. I whipped the sword toward him, and his descending weight slid it right into a fleshy love handle. Blood poured inside his robe, then the blade tore free through the side of his body. The words "mortal wound" flashed over his head. I rolled, then counted off the final 3 seconds of the paralysis before getting to my feet. Bowminster rocked back and forth, clutching the wound. Blood leaked out on the polished wood floor where he lay. Although the orc had stilled, his hand continued to bear down on his own cut. From his silence, I guessed he valued his own life enough not to call out. Threat eliminated. The canvas of my subconscious depicted Tansy Bluebell's laughing face as I glared down at Lyle Bowminster, the man who'd killed her mother, stolen her alchemical secrets. My nose twitched. Any last words from the lion? I pressed the tip of the sword to his chest. Fuck you, little man. You're going to regret this. Little man? That was brazen, coming from a damned goblin. Possibly. But you murdered my friend's mother, and for a long time you've been bullying people in the district I now call home. I cocked my head toward the orc. Hiring muscle to do your dirty work. His eyes narrowed. I have something your friends will want. I don't think so. It's an alchemy tome. Bluebell's recipes. Maybe that young bitch at the cafe would reward you for it. She looks like a piece of fun, right? It was like he wanted me to kill him, despite his offer. I wondered if the family heirloom, the treasure that could bring their family back to the forefront of halfling society, was on-prem. If she could learn her mother's alchemical recipes and offer them to their patrons, I'd have a friend for as long as I was in River City. Bowminster growled, then sputtered. Come on, get me a healing potion and I'll take you to it. Let me go, you get the fucking book. The Antonellis really want you out of the picture. I drew my arm back, shifting the blade to relieve my wobbling halfling muscles. That book is worth more than they could ever pay you, he stammered. Streams of blood flowed between his teeth, then down his lips. Then give it to me, right now. He held up one bloody hand. It's not here. I don't keep it at the estate. Then where is it? I stepped a little closer, donning my most menacing scowl. Get my potion. Let me go. I'll get my assistant to take you. Nope. Please. It's at the what? Where is it? He pressed his lips together, eyes narrowed, and I knew he'd never tell me the truth. Maybe the book wasn't here, but I doubted he'd come off with it. Much as I wanted to please Tansy with a monumental surprise, I'd have to find it on my own. My booted foot pinned his throat. I lined up the tip of the sword and thrust it through his chest. His whole body erupted in convulsions. With a twist of my blade, Lyle Bowminster went still. I snatched up the wand as messages flooded my vision. I had killed Lyle Bowminster, my brawn attribute ranked up to 16, earned XP, yada yada. But this is what caught my eye. Congratulations, you have reached level 8. Fuck yeah! The orc rolled, and the rustling snatched my attention. I turned. He thrust out a thick, bloody digit toward the bedroom. Potion! And if I get it for you, are you going fuck off like a good orc? Or are we gonna have a problem? He shook his head in desperation. No problem, he's gone, I'm out. Where is it? Top drawer. I spied a dresser in the room tucked into the corner farthest from the bed, and sure enough, a glass vial with red liquid sat beneath folded pants. Greater Potion of Healing. This potion will replenish its imbiber's HP by 400 over 15 seconds. That was one hell of a potion. Part of me wanted to pocket it, but another idea occurred when I turned to eye the orc. Returning to the hallway, I stood over him. We meet on the street. You don't know me. You don't say my name to anyone. I might be a level 8 right now, but I plan to change that in a hurry. You fuck with me, and next time I'll cut you open until your entrails flood out. The orc nodded. I dropped the potion on his lap, then stood back against the wall closest to the bedroom. Once I'd selected the option, I allowed myself just a minute to watch the dice bounce and pad my scores. Since I could see the orc through the translucent cloud of text, I'd be aware if he moved my way. My stats popped up when the rolling was done. Ronaldo, Ren Cobb, Halfling. Level 8. You have not selected a class. Rank, Nobody. You're a nobody. Brawn, 20. Determination, 21. Deceit, 12. Intimidation, 14. Logic, 19. Movement speed, 15. Persuasion, 13. Recovery, 18. Stamina, 16. Vitality, 21. Versatility, 16. Professions, Butchery, 5. Carpentry, 3. Action skills, Concealment, 8. Dodge, 3. Traits, Survival, 3. Intuition, 3. Focus, 2. Adaptation, 3. Combat skills, Blades, 6. Knuckles, 2. Counter, 1. Recalling the Antonelli's request that I made the death public, I grabbed Lyle by bare ankles, swung him around, then dragged him into the bedroom. His corpse jiggled when I drew it across the threshold between the French doors leading out to the balcony. A wide, bloody trail painted the floor in our wake. I tore down one of the heavier curtains, then weaved it in a figure 8, a nice touch, I thought, around his legs and feet. Once I'd fastened the other end to the base of the railing, I heaved him over, hoping the spider's web of long curtains would hold. His pajama pants caught on something on the rail and split to his knees as I dumped him. Whoops, dick in the wind. Although the only figures I spotted were too distant to make out the details of a half-naked goblin hanging from a balcony, passers-by would undoubtedly notice the new seasonal decoration, so I rifled through the drawers, snatched up a few goodies, then absconded.